If you're going to fine people 200 Rand for driving with their seatbelt on, all that means is the people who are poor in society, who generally don't have cars, are the ones who are most affected by that law. The richer people in society who can afford the 200 generally don't see the law as something they need to do because they can always pay to get out of it. So what it essentially breeds is a psychology where people believe that, okay, there's a law that says I shouldn't do this, but I can always pay to get out of that because I can afford to pay to get out of that. So you want a deterrent that is pinchy enough that it uniformly affects everyone within society and uniformly deters everyone within society from committing crimes, but also it shouldn't be too pinchy like we just mentioned. Like, is that clear with everyone? Right? And then rehabilitational value. Actually, I'm going to cover that under something else, but let's just start with it, right? The idea is that you don't punish people for the sake of punishing them, because that means nothing, right? If you're going to punish someone, a punishment is something that's immediate, but it's always going to end at some point. So if you're going to put me in some sort of discomfort, that discomfort will end at some point. If you're going to put me in jail, I will come out of jail at some point. So the question is, your punishment, does it teach me, one, that what I've done is wrong? Does it help me understand that? Or alternatively, does it make me hate you even more and want to commit more crimes against you, right? But secondly, your punishment, does it stop me from committing similar crimes when I come out of your discomfort, or committing different crimes when I come out of your discomfort, right? Now, under the first one, and this is where like the argument against prisons in general is that someone has learned how to steal. Your punishment for them is to take them and put them in a building with thousands of other people who've learned how to steal. All that happens because those people collectively sit together and talk is that they learn how to steal better, and they talk to each other about these brilliant stories of this one time I was chased by the police, this one time I was able to pickpocket someone, and that just incentivizes them to commit more crimes when they leave jail because they have the aspiration to do that. So that's the argument basically against jail, that it doesn't really rehabilitate people. And this is where whether or not we need to prioritize rehabilitation comes in, but it's covered under something else, right? So let's look more specifically now at theories on punishment. But firstly, why is punishment important? Anyone? I think we've touched on this, right?
Isn't it to show you that what you've done is wrong?
All right. Does anyone have a different opinion? So you all think punishment is important because we're trying to show you that what you've done is wrong, right? Right.
To keep order.
To keep order. That's the second.
Can I just, before I answer, is it determining a punishment as in if you do this, then this is the punishment?
It's just like punishment as a general idea, whether it's predetermined or it's post-determined.
I would say to make sure that people don't do it in the first place.
Okay, so that's deterrent. You're keeping order, and you're saying to teach you what you've done is wrong. Yeah?
And provide the baseline to see the degrees of how wrong.
All right, it's actually one I haven't thought about before. Right? It teaches you like to what extent, like how wrong what you're doing is, because they're different wrongs, right? Is punishment alone? We're going to come back to that discussion. Is punishment alone enough in enacting criminal justice? So, for example, if you have a criminal justice system where you catch someone, you punish them, and you let them go, is that enough for criminal justice? And when you're answering this, you're going to have to tell me what you believe criminal justice is out to achieve, right? Just in general terms. It just has to be 2 lines. Anyone? Anyone? No one? Is punishment alone enough in enacting criminal justice?
But isn't that why they have probation after you get out of jail?
They have
Probation after you get out of jail. It's
So-
not just punishment.
The question is, right, if we remove probation and we just punish you for like 5 years and we let you go, is that enough to ensure that criminal justice is enacted?
No.
You don't think that's enough.
Psychological.
So say that again like that.
Psychological effects after.
Psychological effects after that. So you think like an important part of like the criminal justice system is for us to be able to psychologically change the way people view the crimes they've committed. And how do you think we best achieve that? How do we change people's psychology about what they believe?
That is sending to rehabilitation centers.
Sending them to rehabilitation centers. So I think the important question here is, and this is where I wanted to get you, is it able to separate punishment and rehabilitation? Like, can you punch someone without rehabilitating them? Or can you rehabilitate someone without punching them?
No.
So you can't separate, right?
So is that like telling a child you love them before giving them a hug?
Yes, it is. It's more probably telling them you love them and telling them that stealing sweets from like grandma it's not a good thing to do. Now that you understand it's not a good thing to do, just like bend over so I can slap you a bit, right? So you have more of an incentive on top. Right? And the idea here is that, like, changing the way, because it takes so long to build personal identity and to build like views, changing those views is an extremely difficult process. So for example, people, and like politics is a classic example, people for example who support the ANC because they believe it's the party of liberation and they've supported it from birth, it's extremely difficult to have conversations with those people about them stopping to support the ANC because the ANC is doing certain things. And it goes both ways. Even people who support the DA will also not be likely to buy into talking about, just one second, right? Talking about like stopping that support. And this is because people generally enjoy their comfort zone, right? What I know is what I'm most comfortable with, right?
So that is basically the concept of battered housewife syndrome. Even in the political system, because he's too comfortable in that zone. Even though he beats me, I'm safe there.
Absolutely. And like I suppose what battered wife syndrome adds to like all political analysis is that because you love something, you always want to see the best in it. So what will always happen is whenever the ANC does something good, even if it's a small thing, you will blow that out of proportion and think like it's an absolutely brilliant thing. But when they do something bad, you'll downplay it, you'll think like it's, you know, like just like media saga or whatever, right? And it's the same with like battered wife syndrome. If he brings you flowers, you think he's the most amazing man on the face of the earth. If he slaps you, you think it's because you pissed him off, so you blame yourself, right? So basically, that's the difficulty in changing people's psychology. And I think like there's a lot of discussion to be had about what's the best way to change the criminal, because like I'm sure like we all agree that the criminal justice system right now is extremely insufficient. It's more of we just want to remove you away from like society right now, so we don't have to deal with you anymore, but we don't look at it like in terms of longevity, right? So I think there's a lot of discussion to be had about what's the best way to ensure that we can adequately punish and rehabilitate criminals so that they are unlikely to commit similar crimes again, but also more importantly, that they understand that the crimes they committed were generally bad and society isn't just like hating on them, right?
But isn't that the problem with criminals in like the general? They have that comfort zone where as long as they're inside of the crime being committed, they're safe with those people. Even going to jail will not do much because those are the people that they associate with in general as well.
Yes, it's all about now changing the views about that association. It's just like how parents have conversations with their children about hanging out with drug dealers versus hanging out with nerds. It's an association that can be changed to the extent that you can show someone how this association negatively affects them. But you have to go over and above like punching them and showing them how it negatively affects them. You have to show them an alternative that can positively affect them, and realistically positively affect them. So things like, for example, in some states, prisoners not being able to vote even after they've served their sentence, or like prisoners who people don't necessarily want to hire. That just aggravates people who need the most help within society even more. So essentially, you're taking the people who need the most help from you, and you're just like alienating them, and you're not helping them at all. And that sort of like always comes back to bite you.
But if punishment and rehabilitation or psychology has to come together, like in Portugal, they decriminalize drugs, they decriminalize it, and they treat drug addiction as a public health issue, so they only rehabilitate people. Now, if that could work there, I mean, they have the lowest drug addiction thing in the world. Now, if that works there, where it goes without punishment, can't it work in every country if it's just rehabilitation?
The question is, right, is doing drugs bad to the extent that, I don't want to say you label it a crime, but yeah, okay, let me give you a paradigm, right? So for example, if I murder someone, right, I need to understand that I've murdered someone, but over and above me understanding that, there are people who've been affected by my actions that need to understand that the government is standing up for them. Because mind you, even though the government has a responsibility to you, the person who's committed the crime, and rehabilitating you, They have responsibility to the victims of your crime to show them that we are able to keep their situation under control. The difficulty with drugs is drugs seldom affect more than just you. So it's a lot easier for us to remove the sanction because we're not trying to prove anything to anyone and just focus on showing you why doing drugs is a bad thing. So in that instance, we can totally just rehabilitate you because there's no one else who's been affected by your crime that will go crazy if we don't punish you. So retribution, it does have some sort of significant value within society, right? And we're going to have a chat about this just now also. And what I want you to be thinking about is to what extent does retribution really satisfy the victims of the crime? So rape, 20 years, to what extent does that satisfy the woman who's been raped? Murder, like for life, to what extent does that satisfy the family of the person who murdered? So just like toy with that in here for now, we're going to have a discussion about it just now. Yes?
I was going to ask, like with people that live in poverty, they don't have any food or stuff like that, then they would rather commit a crime, go to jail, where they get food, and they would rather live in jail, be a safer place. So what have we done about that now? Because it's not, how can you rehabilitate them? Because if you put them out of society, they'll just do it again, because to get back into jail is food.
Absolutely. And I think it goes back to what we're talking about just now, about like a reform to the criminal justice system. If there are people within society who believe that jail is a haven, our ability to rehabilitate those views within prison and then actively ensure that when those people leave prison, they have a constructive lifestyle to go to, then we ensure that those people don't need to feel that way anymore. So for example, having like the places where government has like these like large factories that you have like a majority of convicts working in. So regardless of what your crime was, when you leave jail, we put you on probation and then we throw you in the factory so you can make a living. So people with that kind of mentality don't have a reason anymore to want to go back to jail. Because even though you're getting 3 meals a day, like there are terrible things that happen in jail that people necessarily won't want to opt into if they don't have an option. So it's about providing people who don't have options with more options, right?
Yeah, but I see as well as, especially like in the Northern Cape, we get the colours, where they take it in their own hands, like with the Martin works as well. If that person gets out, they are in harm's way of being killed by that particular person's family, like taking the law into their own hands and killing them.
You see, and that's why we're saying that retribution is extremely important. So if the family feels like justice has been served and you got what you deserve, then the family is less likely to take the law into their own hands. So it's about that balance we're talking about. If you're able to rehabilitate and enact like a retribution when you're passing out laws, what that means is the family will be satisfied, the person will be rehabilitated. They are unlikely to commit further crimes. The family is also unlikely to commit crimes against that person because they feel that that person has got what they deserve. There's no need to like go out and do anything. You know what I mean? That happens majoritatively in instances where you find, for example, like like places like Mexico or like the terrible parts of America or whatever, where people generally just don't have faith in the justice system. They don't believe that the justice system represents them. In fact, they believe that the justice system violates them and doesn't, represent them as much as it does the rest of society. When people do feel that way, then people will take the law into their own hands. Right? Anyone else?
Like with regards to what happened in Kuzong where the children were burnt because they were taken to jail after committing crimes and they were released because they were minors. So what do we do with that? How do we deal with the whole punishment thing? Because even the police felt that them being burned somehow was okay.
It's really difficult when you tread it into minor territory. And I think this is evidenced by the way different states deal with when minors commit crimes. Right? So some people will send you to jury, some people will wait till you're 18 to prosecute you. It's in cases where the statute of limitation hasn't passed. Some people will let you go completely free. And it's about how you respond to situations like that. So the fact that I'm young doesn't mean that I can't form the intention to kill someone and I can't go out and do it. So I have committed a crime. I obviously do need rehabilitation and I do need punishment. When the government takes an active decision not to punish me, they're just handing me to the rest of society. Because whenever society feels like it's not being represented, society wants to represent itself. When people get together and they collectivize, they always want to protect each other and people that recognize themselves as part of that group. So if like one of the ladies had said like, look, my children were murdered or whatever, and these guys are going scot-free, society is going to act. So it really is, there's really, with every criminal justice system, a lot of work that needs to be done with regards to how people, number one, feel about the criminal justice system, and number two, how you deal with people who actually commit crimes. Right. Anything else? No, great. So, punishment and victim psychology. Now, like with the questions, we've sort of like already spoken about this, right? But let's look at specifically victim psychology, and this comes very handy in motions. For example, we debated a motion once where two different motions actually, where we wanted to give early parole to prisoners who donated vital body parts to people who were dying. The second one is you wanted to give early parole to prisoners who completed formal education whilst in jail. So if I went to jail and I had been given like 20 years without possibility of parole, if I complete my law degree while in jail, then maybe after 13 years I can get parole. Or if someone really needs a kidney and I donate my kidney, then I should be given early parole. And it goes back to that question of like, how long does it take to change the psychology of a person? What does it take to change the psychology of a person? Is it like one random, like good act of giving a body part? Is it maybe going through formal education and understanding that certain things are bad and certain things are good? So there's like a whole lot of argumentation around like victim psychology and how you are best able to do that. But I think like the most uniform and accepted response towards victim psychology is the idea that, look, you need to actively rehabilitate people. You need to actively monitor people's behavior. So you need to strengthen prison systems, and instead of having like all these wardens and all these policemen, maybe introduce a few more psychologists who are 24 hours a day monitoring how prisoners behave. Because regardless of like how much you want to get out of jail, you're not going to be able to pretend 24 hours a day, every day of your life, that you're a good person. So like, strengthen monitoring in prisons and things like that. So we're sure that your psychology has changed, right? So that's basically criminal liability. Let's look at a number of, maybe like one or two motions that deal with criminal liability and whether or not people should be criminal liable. So I think this was Austral's 2012 grand final. This house would legally require people to act in instances where they have a moral obligation to act. So basically the idea is that like with the little girl's example we spoke about, when people see that little girl, they have a legal duty to act to help her. Let's hear what you guys think about it. Do you think people should have a legal duty to act, or is it just a moral duty to act? So if like a little kid's swimming and you see one of them drowning, right now you're legally allowed to just turn an eye and drink your margarita. There's nothing in law that forces you to help those kids. Do you think those people should be forced to help those kids?
Okay, so when I did my first aid training, they actually told us all these things. And then afterwards he said that since we're only level 1, we should ask around in case someone is a level 2 or level 3. Because in the case that maybe we do something wrong, anything wrong in that instance, we could be held legally responsible for their actions. So thinking that people will not agree to this, because I mean, if they do anything wrong in that instance, they will be held legally responsible for the consequences.
Brilliant. So like if we were willing to exonerate you from all liability, so let's say you tried to help and you ended up like snapping the person's neck by mistake. If we exonerated you from all liability, do you think that people should have like a duty to say no?
Again, I would say no, because these people could, well, not know what they're doing and still try and do CPR or close up a wound and therefore scar this person further. So the damage done afterwards could still be worse than them actually saving that person.
Okay, so let's remove it from a more technical sphere and talk about things like, for example, you're aware of the fact that your neighbor beats his wife daily. What about interference in those circumstances?
So actually you can't place that legal obligation on someone, because for you to morally act, many a time you need to put yourself in harm's way. So if someone's drowning, you want me to save that person because it's a moral obligation. I need to jump into the water and possibly face drowning. In the case of like my neighbor beating my wife, I need to go into that house which is an unstable
Environment.
atmosphere, and I need to go try and save that person. I can put myself in harm's way, and like that shouldn't be a legal obligation to put on someone.